They laughed at a quiet volunteer carrying boxes in the rain, until a teenager exposed a painful truth that stopped the entire room cold. But nobody knew that the man standing beside him was actually Keanu Reeves himself, and what happened next changed that teenager's life forever. "Sir," volunteers enter through the back. The woman behind the folding registration table didn't even look up when she spoke. Her fingers moved quickly across a clipboard while dozens of people rushed through the crowded community center lobby carrying boxes, food trays, and donation bags. Outside, heavy rain hammered the streets of downtown Chicago. Water rolled down the tall glass windows while cold wind pushed against the entrance doors every few seconds. Inside, however, the building glowed with warmth. Volunteers hurried across the hall decorating tables, preparing meals, organizing winter coats, and setting up chairs for the annual youth fundraiser hosted by the Reeves Hope Foundation. It was one of the biggest charity events of the year. Local news stations were expected to arrive later. City officials had promised appearances. Hundreds of struggling families from nearby neighborhoods were already lining up outside for food, clothing, and emergency assistance. And standing quietly near the entrance in a faded gray hoodie, dark jeans, and muddy boots, was Keanu Reeves. But nobody recognized him. Not the volunteers rushing past him. Not the security guards checking IDs. Not the event coordinators shouting instructions into radios. To everyone there, he looked like just another tired volunteer trying to help during a stormy evening. Keanu smiled politely at the woman behind the table. "Back entrance?" he asked softly. She pointed down the hallway without looking up. "Through the kitchen. You'll get an apron there." "Thanks." He picked up 2 heavy supply boxes sitting near the wall and quietly headed toward the kitchen. No complaints. No attitude. No mention that the foundation carrying his own last name technically belonged to him. Inside the kitchen, chaos filled every corner. Steam rose from giant pots of soup. Teen volunteers stacked bread trays near the serving area. An exhausted cook yelled for more plastic utensils while another volunteer accidentally dropped an entire box of canned drinks across the floor. The loud clattering echoed through the room. "I got it," Keanu said immediately. Before anyone could react, he crouched down and started collecting cans one by one. A young volunteer beside him sighed in frustration. "Worst night ever." Keanu handed him a can and smiled slightly. "Could be worse." The teenager laughed weakly. "You sound way too calm for this place." Keanu shrugged. "Chaos happens." For the next 2 hours, nobody paid much attention to him. He carried tables, cleaned spills, moved chairs, helped elderly guests find seats. When a little girl dropped her dinner plate near the serving line and burst into tears, Keanu knelt beside her and quietly helped clean the mess while making silly jokes until she smiled again. Still, nobody recognized him. And honestly, he seemed happier that way. Across the main event hall, music played softly while families filled the tables. Some people laughed for the first time in weeks. Others quietly wrapped donated blankets around their children while volunteers moved through the crowd offering hot drinks and desserts. But near the far corner of the room sat someone completely alone. A teenage boy. 17 years old. Thin hoodie. Arms crossed tightly. Eyes filled with anger. His name was Marcus Hill. Unlike the others, Marcus didn't touch the food placed in front of him. He didn't talk to anyone either. While the entire room buzzed with noise and movement, he sat silently staring at the volunteers with visible frustration. Especially the smiling ones. Especially the wealthy donors taking photos near the stage. Marcus hated events like this. To him, charity was fake. People came for attention. For social media posts. For applause. Then they disappeared back into their comfortable lives while families like his kept struggling. And tonight was harder than usual. Earlier that morning, Marcus's mother had received another eviction warning. Their electricity bill was overdue again. His little sister needed asthma medication they still couldn't afford. And despite working part-time after school every day, Marcus knew college was becoming impossible. The pressure inside him had been building for months. Maybe years. Then he noticed the quiet volunteer in the gray hoodie carrying food trays across the hall. Unlike the others, this man never stopped moving. No photos. No speeches. No fake smiles. Just work. Marcus watched him carefully. There was something strangely familiar about him, but before he could figure it out, the volunteer approached his table holding 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. "Mind if I sit here?" the man asked calmly. Marcus looked up suspiciously. "Lots of empty seats somewhere else." The volunteer smiled slightly. "True." But instead of leaving, he gently placed 1 cup on the table and sat down anyway. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The noise of the event echoed around them while rain continued hitting the windows outside. Finally Marcus muttered, "You don't belong here." The volunteer looked at him. "What makes you say that?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You look too normal." The man laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." But Marcus didn't smile. "I'm serious," he said. "Most volunteers here act like helping poor people is some kind of school project." The man remained quiet. Marcus continued. "They come for one night, feel good about themselves, then disappear." Still no response. That almost annoyed Marcus more. "You disagree?" The volunteer slowly shook his head. "No," he admitted quietly. "Some people do that." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "So why are you here?" The man looked around the crowded hall before answering. "Because somebody once helped me." Marcus scoffed immediately. "Yeah, right." The volunteer took a sip of hot chocolate. "You don't believe me?" Marcus shook his head. "People who've actually struggled don't walk around looking peaceful." For the first time all evening, the man's expression changed slightly. Not anger. Not offense. Something deeper. Like recognition. "You'd be surprised," he said softly. Marcus studied him carefully now. There was calmness in this stranger's voice. Real calmness. The kind that usually came from surviving difficult things. Still, Marcus wasn't convinced. Others pretended not to hear. But the volunteer beside Marcus stayed completely calm. And after a long silence, he quietly asked, "What happened to make you feel that way?" Marcus stared at him for several seconds. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he started talking. Marcus stared down at the cup of hot chocolate sitting in front of him. Thin steam still curled into the air, but he never touched it. For a few moments, he said nothing. The volunteer beside him didn't rush him either. That felt strange. Most adults either interrupted him, judged him, or immediately started giving advice. But this man simply waited quietly, like he genuinely wanted to listen. Finally Marcus spoke. "My dad left when I was 9. The noise of the fundraiser continued around them. Kids laughed near the dessert table. Volunteers carried donation boxes through the hall. Somewhere near the stage, microphones screeched with feedback before someone quickly adjusted the sound system. But at their small corner table, everything suddenly felt quieter. "My mom works all day," Marcus continued, "cleaning offices downtown." The volunteer nodded slightly. "She leaves before sunrise," Marcus said. "Sometimes she gets home after midnight." He laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny? She still apologizes to us for not being around." The volunteer remained silent, listening carefully. Marcus rubbed his hands together nervously before continuing. "We used to have an apartment near my school. Nothing special, but it was home." His jaw tightened. "Then rent went up. The words came out flat and emotionless, but the pain behind them was obvious. We fell behind on payments. My mom tried everything. Extra shifts. Borrowing money. Selling furniture. He looked away toward the crowded hall. Didn't matter. The volunteer quietly asked, "What happened?" Marcus swallowed hard. "We got evicted." Even after saying the words, Marcus still sounded angry. Like he still couldn't fully accept it. "My little sister thought we were going on vacation because we packed everything into trash bags." The volunteer lowered his eyes slightly. Marcus forced out a laugh. "She kept asking when we were coming back home." For the first time, his voice cracked. "We never did." A long silence followed. Rain slammed harder against the windows outside while cold wind rattled the glass. Marcus finally grabbed the hot chocolate cup, mostly just to keep his hands busy. "We stayed in motels for a while," he said quietly. "Then shelters." The volunteer didn't react dramatically. No fake sympathy. No shocked expressions. Just attention. Real attention. And somehow that made Marcus keep talking. "You know what people don't understand?" he asked suddenly. "Being poor is exhausting." The volunteer nodded slowly. Marcus leaned forward now, emotions building stronger. "Everyone says work harder. Stay positive. Keep fighting." His voice sharpened, "But nobody talks about what it feels like waking up every day scared your family might lose everything again." Several nearby volunteers had started listening without pretending otherwise anymore. Marcus noticed them but didn't care. "School counselors give speeches about dreams and success," he continued. "But when your mom can't afford groceries, dreams start sounding stupid." The volunteer finally spoke again. "What do you want?" Marcus frowned. "What? What do you want for your future?" The question caught him off guard. Nobody asked him that anymore. Teachers asked about grades. Landlords asked for payments. Employers asked about schedules. But nobody asked what he actually wanted. Marcus stared at the table. "I used to want to become an engineer." "Used to?" He shrugged. "College costs money. You're good at math." Marcus gave a small nod. "Really good." The volunteer smiled slightly. "I can tell." Marcus looked confused. "How?" "You think carefully before speaking." That answer surprised him. Then the volunteer added, "People who solve problems usually pause before answering." Marcus didn't know why, but hearing that made something shift slightly inside him, not enough to erase his anger, but enough to make him curious. Who was this guy? Because he definitely didn't sound like the other volunteers. Before Marcus could ask more questions, loud cheering suddenly erupted near the stage again. A local businessman had just donated a large check while photographers crowded around him taking pictures. Flash after flash lit up the room. Marcus rolled his eyes immediately. "There," he muttered. "Perfect example." The volunteer looked toward the stage. "He donated money." Marcus scoffed. "And made sure cameras saw it." The volunteer turned back toward him calmly. "Maybe both things can be true." Marcus frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Maybe he likes attention," the volunteer said. "But maybe the donation still helps people." Marcus crossed his arms again. "That doesn't make him a good person." "No," the volunteer admitted. "But it doesn't automatically make him bad either." Marcus looked irritated now. "You always defend rich people." The volunteer smiled faintly. "No. I just try not to judge people too quickly." Marcus stared at him carefully. "That's easy to say when life's good." For the first time, the volunteer hesitated slightly. Then he quietly replied, "Life hasn't always been good." Marcus didn't answer. Something about the way the man said those words felt real. Not rehearsed. Not dramatic. Just honest. A few seconds later, an exhausted event coordinator rushed over holding a clipboard. "We need extra help unloading supplies from the truck," she said quickly. "Can someone?" Her eyes landed on the volunteer. "Oh, thank God," she sighed. "You've been helping everywhere tonight." The volunteer stood immediately. "I'll help." Before leaving, he looked at Marcus. "Want to come?" Marcus almost said no automatically. But for some reason, he didn't. "Fine," he muttered while standing slowly. Outside, cold rain soaked the parking lot while volunteers struggled carrying heavy donation boxes from a delivery truck into the building. The moment Marcus stepped outside, freezing wind hit his face. "Careful," the volunteer warned while lifting a large box. "Ground slippery." Marcus grabbed another box beside him. For the next 20 minutes, they worked side by side in the rain. Neither complained. Neither stopped. And little by little, Marcus noticed strange things about this man. He treated every volunteer respectfully. He thanked everyone. He carried heavier loads than people half his age. And even when nobody was watching, he kept working. At one point, a teenage volunteer accidentally slipped near the truck, dropping an entire box of canned food across the wet pavement. Several cans rolled into puddles. "Oh, come on," the boy groaned in embarrassment. Without hesitation, the volunteer crouched into the freezing water helping collect every single can. "It happens," he said calmly. The teenager looked embarrassed. "Sorry." "No need." Marcus watched silently. Most people with money avoided dirty work. This guy didn't. After carrying the final box inside, Marcus finally asked the question that had been bothering him all night. "So what do you actually do?" The volunteer paused. "A little bit of everything." Marcus laughed slightly. "That's not a real answer." The man smiled. "It's the best one I've got." Before Marcus could respond, a middle-aged woman suddenly rushed toward them from across the hall holding several folders. The second she looked up at the volunteer, she froze completely. Her eyes widened in total shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. Marcus frowned in confusion. The woman nearly dropped everything in her hands. "Mr. Reeves?" Nearby volunteers turned instantly. The room slowly grew quieter. Marcus blinked. "Wait." The woman stared at the volunteer in disbelief. "You're actually here?" Several people nearby gasped loudly. Phones slowly lowered. Conversation stopped. And as realization spread across the room, Marcus felt his stomach drop. Because suddenly, he recognized the face sitting beside him all night. The quiet volunteer in the gray hoodie wasn't just some random helper. It was Keanu Reeves. The room fell completely silent. For a moment, even the music near the stage seemed quieter. Marcus stood frozen beside the donation table, rainwater still dripping from the sleeves of his hoodie. Around him, volunteers stared in disbelief while whispers spread across the hall like wildfire. "That's Keanu Reeves." "No way. He's actually here." "Are you serious?" Phones slowly came out. Several teenagers rushed closer for a better look. The middle-aged woman holding the folders looked embarrassed now. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't realize you wanted to stay unnoticed." Keanu Reeves rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly and gave a small smile. "It's okay, Linda." But the attention around them kept growing. Within seconds, nearly everyone in the hall was staring. Marcus felt completely stunned. His mind replayed every conversation from the past hour. Rich people only pretend to care. You don't belong here. People like you don't understand struggle. He had said all of it directly to one of the most famous actors in the world. Marcus immediately looked down. I didn't know it was you, he muttered quietly. Keanu turned toward him. That's probably why we had an honest conversation. Some nearby volunteers laughed nervously. But Marcus still looked embarrassed. I shouldn't have said all that. Keanu shook his head immediately. No, he said calmly. You should have. Marcus looked confused. What? You were honest, Keanu replied. Not disrespectful. The teenager blinked in surprise. Most celebrities would have gotten offended. Most powerful people hated criticism. But Keanu seemed completely unbothered. Actually, he seemed thoughtful. A volunteer nearby asked nervously, "Do you want security to clear some space?" Keanu looked around at the growing crowd. No, he answered gently. Everyone's fine. That response only shocked people more. Several teenagers started whispering excitedly while others stared at Marcus with jealousy. Bro, you were talking to Keanu Reeves like he was your uncle. Marcus barely heard them. His mind was spinning. Because now everything made sense. The calm voice. The familiar face. The way volunteers treated him once they recognized him. But one thing still didn't make sense. Why was Keanu Reeves carrying boxes in the rain instead of standing on stage giving speeches? Marcus finally asked the question directly. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? Keanu shrugged lightly. Because I came here to help. That's it? That's enough. The simplicity of the answer hit Marcus harder than expected. No dramatic speech. No inspirational performance. Just honesty. Nearby, the foundation director hurried toward them with obvious panic on her face. Mr. Reeves, the media team is asking if you'd like to come to the stage. Keanu immediately shook his head. No thanks. She blinked. But the reporters. Families came here for support, he interrupted kindly. Not to watch me talk. The director hesitated. Then slowly nodded. Understood. As she walked away, Marcus stared at him in disbelief. You seriously hate attention that much? Keanu laughed softly. I work in Hollywood. I get enough attention already. That made Marcus smile for the first time all night. A real smile. Not forced. Not sarcastic. And somehow, Keanu noticed immediately. There it is, he said. Marcus frowned slightly. What? That smile. Marcus rolled his eyes a little. Relax. Don't make it weird. Keanu laughed again. The tension between them finally started fading. A few minutes later, volunteers returned to work while excitement slowly settled down across the room. People still glanced toward Keanu constantly, but he acted like nothing had changed. He picked up another supply box. Come on, he told Marcus. We still have work to do. Marcus stared at him. You're seriously going back to carrying boxes? Those boxes won't move themselves. The teenager shook his head in disbelief before following him. For the next hour, the two worked side by side again. But now Marcus saw everything differently. Every volunteer suddenly treated Keanu with extra politeness. People offered him easier jobs. Several staff members tried convincing him to rest. He refused every time. At one point, an older volunteer approached nervously holding a phone. My wife loves your movies, the man said shyly. Could I maybe get a photo? Of course. Keanu smiled warmly, took the picture, thanked the man, and immediately returned to unloading supplies like nothing happened. No ego. No impatience. No celebrity attitude. Marcus watched carefully. The more he observed Keanu, the more confused he became. Because this wasn't how famous people acted online. At least not the ones Marcus usually saw. Later, while organizing food trays near the serving tables, Marcus finally asked another question. So, This foundation really belongs to you? Keanu nodded while stacking plastic containers. I help run it. Why? Keanu glanced toward the families eating dinner across the hall. Because people need help. Marcus sighed. Yeah, but rich people usually donate money and disappear. Keanu placed another tray onto the table. Money helps, he admitted. But time matters too. That sentence stayed in Marcus's mind. Time matters too. Most wealthy people protected their time more than anything. Yet Keanu Reeves was spending his evening cleaning tables during a rainstorm, not filming movies, not attending red carpet events, not relaxing in some luxury mansion. Just helping. And for the first time in months, Marcus felt his anger weakening slightly. Not disappearing, but cracking. Then something unexpected happened. Near the entrance, a small argument suddenly broke out between a volunteer and a teenage boy trying to sneak extra food containers into his backpack. I said stop, the volunteer snapped. Other families need food too. The boy looked terrified. I'm sorry, he whispered quickly. My brothers are still home. People nearby started staring. The embarrassed teenager looked ready to run. Before things escalated further, Keanu quietly stepped forward. It's okay, he said gently. The volunteer turned, but he's taking extras. Keanu looked at the frightened teenager. How many people at home? 3, the boy admitted quietly. Without hesitation, Keanu grabbed another food container and handed it to him. Take these too. The volunteer looked confused. But what if everyone? Most people don't steal food unless they really need it, Keanu replied softly. The room became quiet again. The teenage boy looked close to tears. Thank you, he whispered. Keanu nodded kindly. Take care of your brothers. As the boy hurried out the door clutching the food containers tightly, Marcus stared at Keanu in disbelief once again. You trusted him just like that? Keanu looked toward the door. Hunger makes people desperate. Marcus stayed silent. Because deep down, he understood exactly what Keanu meant. An hour later, the fundraiser finally started slowing down. Families gradually left carrying blankets, canned food, hygiene kits, and winter clothing. Volunteers cleaned tables while staff members counted remaining supplies. The storm outside had weakened slightly, though rain still tapped steadily against the windows. Marcus and Keanu sat near the back wall drinking bottled water after hours of non-stop work. For the first time all evening, Marcus felt physically exhausted. But strangely, lighter. Keanu leaned back in his chair. You worked hard tonight. Marcus shrugged. Used to it. You shouldn't have to be. That answer caught Marcus off guard. Before he could respond, Keanu suddenly looked at him seriously. You know something, he said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're carrying a lot of anger. The teenager looked away immediately. Can you blame me? No, Keanu admitted softly. Not at all. A long silence followed. Then Keanu added words Marcus would never forget. But if you hold on to anger forever, eventually it starts controlling your life. Marcus stared down at the floor. Because deep inside, he knew that was already happening. The fundraiser hall had grown quieter. Most families had already gone home, carrying bags of groceries, blankets, donated clothes, and leftover meals through the rainy streets outside. Volunteers slowly cleaned tables while workers stacked chairs near the walls. The loud energy from earlier was gone now. Only soft music played through the speakers. Marcus sat across from Keanu Reeves near the back corner of the room, twisting a water bottle nervously between his hands. Keanu's words kept replaying in his head. If you hold on to anger forever, eventually it starts controlling your life. Marcus hated how true that sounded. For months, anger had become part of him. Anger at landlords. Anger at schools. Anger at rich people. Anger at every smiling person who seemed to have an easier life. Sometimes he even got angry at his own mother for apologizing all the time. And the worst part? He didn't know how to stop. Marcus stared toward the nearly empty stage while volunteers unplugged microphones and carried equipment away. "You make it sound easy," he muttered quietly. Keanu shook his head immediately. "It's not easy." Marcus looked at him. "Then how do you do it?" For the first time that evening, Keanu leaned back in his chair and grew unusually quiet. Like he was deciding how much to say. Finally he spoke. "When I was younger, life got very difficult sometimes." Marcus listened carefully. Keanu wasn't speaking like a celebrity during an interview. He sounded like a normal person remembering painful memories. "My father wasn't around much," Keanu continued softly. "My mom worked incredibly hard to take care of us." Marcus blinked slightly. That part sounded familiar. "We moved around a lot," Keanu said. "Different schools. Different cities. Different people." He gave a faint smile. "After a while, you stop expecting stability." Marcus stared at him now. The calmness in Keanu's voice made the story feel even more real. "There were moments when things felt lonely," Keanu admitted. "Very lonely." The teenager didn't interrupt. "I lost people I loved," Keanu continued quietly. "Some unexpectedly. Some far too early." Marcus noticed something change in his eyes when he said those words. Pain. Real pain. Not dramatic pain for cameras. The kind people carry privately for years. And suddenly Marcus remembered something. Articles. Interviews. Stories online about tragedies in Keanu Reeves' life. He had heard them before but never really paid attention. Now, sitting only a few feet away from him, those stories suddenly felt human. Keanu looked down at his hands for a moment before continuing. "Grief changes you," he said softly. "Sometimes it makes you kinder. Sometimes it makes you colder." Marcus swallowed quietly. "And what happened to you?" Keanu thought for a second. "A little of both." The honesty in that answer hit Marcus harder than any motivational speech ever could. Because it sounded real. Nobody was perfectly strong all the time. Not even someone admired by millions. A volunteer passed nearby carrying trash bags, but neither of them noticed. Marcus finally asked carefully, "How did you keep going?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Some days I didn't know if I could." That answer stunned Marcus. Most famous people acted like they had everything figured out. Keanu didn't. And somehow that made Marcus trust him even more. Then Keanu said something that completely changed the direction of the conversation. "But people helped me." Marcus frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean strangers showed me kindness when they didn't have to." Keanu leaned forward slightly now. "A friend gave me a place to stay once when I was struggling." Marcus listened closely. "Another person helped me when I had almost nothing." Keanu looked around the hall. "And I never forgot that." For several seconds, Marcus said nothing. Because suddenly he understood something important. Keanu Reeves wasn't helping people because he felt guilty. He wasn't volunteering for attention. He was trying to give back the kindness he once received himself. "That's why you do all this?" Marcus asked quietly. Keanu nodded. "Kindness matters more than people realize." Marcus looked toward the rain-covered windows. "That's hard to believe sometimes." "I know." "No, seriously," Marcus said, emotions rising again. "You don't understand what it's like constantly feeling behind everybody else." Keanu remained calm. "Then explain it to me." Marcus sighed heavily. "It feels like life already decided who wins." His voice sharpened. Some kids grow up with money, tutors, safe neighborhoods, college savings. He laughed bitterly. Meanwhile, people like my mom work themselves to death just trying to survive. Keanu listened without interrupting. Marcus continued. And then society acts shocked when poor kids get angry. A long silence followed. Then Keanu quietly asked, "Do you think anger protects you?" Marcus frowned. What? Sometimes anger feels safer than disappointment. The teenager stared at him. Because deep down, he knew exactly what Keanu meant. If Marcus stayed angry all the time, he never had to admit he was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of becoming trapped in poverty forever. Scared that all his hard work might never matter. Keanu's voice softened slightly. You're carrying responsibility most adults couldn't handle. Marcus looked away immediately. Nobody had ever said that before. Teachers called him distracted. Employers called him tired, but nobody acknowledged how hard his life actually was. Keanu continued. That pressure changes people. Marcus swallowed hard. Then quietly admitted something he had never told anyone. Sometimes I feel guilty for being angry. Keanu nodded slowly. That's normal. Marcus laughed bitterly. No, it's not. It is, Keanu said gently. Especially when you love your family. The teenager's eyes lowered toward the floor. Because every decision he made revolved around protecting them. Working extra hours. Skipping meals sometimes. Pretending things were okay around his little sister. Trying not to break down in front of his mother. It was exhausting. And suddenly, he felt understood. Not judged. Not pitted. Understood. Keanu glanced toward the nearly empty serving tables. When I was younger, he said softly, I thought strength meant hiding pain. Marcus looked at him again. But real strength, Keanu continued, comes from staying kind even after life hurts you. Those words settled deeply into the room. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Because honestly, he didn't know how to. For years he had believed kindness belonged to weak people. People who got taken advantage of. But tonight, sitting beside someone who had experienced loss, struggle, and fame yet still treated strangers with respect. That belief started breaking apart. Then Marcus quietly asked the question sitting in his mind all night. Why are you being nice to me? Keanu smiled slightly. Because someone was nice to me once. No, Marcus said seriously. I mean after everything I said earlier. Keanu shrugged lightly. You were hurting. Marcus stared at him silently. The simplicity of that answer nearly made his chest ache. No anger. No ego. Just understanding. At that moment, the foundation director walked toward them carrying a thick folder filled with paperwork. Sorry to interrupt, she said carefully, but before we close tonight, there's something important you should probably see. Keanu looked up. What is it? She opened the folder slowly. These are scholarship applications from local students. Marcus instantly looked uncomfortable. Because sitting right on top of the stack was his application. The moment Marcus saw his application sitting inside the folder, his stomach tightened. He immediately looked away. Oh, he muttered quietly. That. The foundation director glanced between Marcus and Keanu Reeves before speaking carefully. I didn't realize you two already met. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Yeah, kind of. Keanu looked down at the papers. Scholarship applications? The director nodded. We review them every year for students struggling financially. Marcus instantly felt uncomfortable. He hated talking about money. Hated people reading details about his life. Hated looking like someone who needed saving. I'm probably not getting it anyway, he muttered. The director frowned slightly. That's not true. Marcus shrugged. There are probably students who need it more. Keanu opened the folder slowly. Can I look? The director nodded. Marcus wanted to say no, very badly. But something stopped him. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe trust. Maybe the strange feeling that Keanu genuinely cared. The room around them had mostly emptied now. Only a few volunteers remained cleaning tables while workers stacked leftover food containers near the kitchen. Rain still tapped softly against the windows outside. Keanu carefully read through the first page. Marcus Hill. Age 17. Academic average. Part-time employment, grocery store stock assistant. Career goal, mechanical engineering. Household income, below poverty level. Keanu looked impressed. You work after school every day? Marcus nodded slightly. Mostly evenings. And still maintain these grades? Marcus shrugged awkwardly. I try. The foundation director crossed her arms. His teachers speak very highly of him. Marcus looked embarrassed immediately. They exaggerate. They absolutely do not, she replied. Keanu flipped through more pages quietly. Recommendation letters. Attendance reports. Financial statements. Then he paused at one handwritten section near the back. Personal essay. He glanced at Marcus. You wrote this yourself? Marcus nodded nervously. Yeah. Keanu looked back down and started reading silently. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Marcus felt like his chest was tightening more every second. Because those pages contained things he normally never shared with anyone. The fear of losing their home. Watching his mother cry when bills piled up. Trying to stay focused in school while wondering if the electricity would be shut off again. The humiliation of pretending everything was normal around classmates. And one sentence in particular stood out. I don't want sympathy. I just want a chance. Keanu read that line twice. Then slowly closed the folder. That's powerful, he said quietly. Marcus looked down immediately. It's just the truth. The foundation director pulled another chair closer and sat beside them. We've been reviewing applications all week, she explained. There are so many deserving students. Marcus nodded slightly. He already knew how difficult the selection process would be. That's why he never allowed himself to get hopeful. Hope was dangerous. Disappointment hurt less when you expected failure from the beginning. Keanu rested the folder gently on the table. How long have you wanted to study engineering? Marcus hesitated. Since middle school. What inspired it? A faint smile appeared on Marcus's face for the first time in a while. I like fixing things. Keanu nodded. Cars? Anything, Marcus admitted. Machines. Electronics. Broken appliances. The director laughed softly. He repaired the community center's heater last winter. Marcus looked embarrassed again. It wasn't a big deal. It saved us thousands of dollars, she corrected. Keanu smiled. So you solve problems? Marcus shrugged. I guess. A few seconds later, Keanu asked another question. If money wasn't a problem, what would your future look like? The teenager stared quietly at the table. Nobody asked him things like that. Most people asked about survival. Not dreams. Finally he answered softly. I'd go to college. Keanu listened carefully. I'd get a stable job. Marcus swallowed. And I'd make sure my mom never had to work herself to death again. Silence filled the room again. The honesty in Marcus's voice hit hard. Not because he sounded dramatic. Because he sounded sincere. Keanu leaned back slightly in his chair. You love your family a lot. Marcus nodded immediately. They're all I got. The director quietly wiped at her eyes. Even Marcus noticed. Sorry, she laughed weakly. I've been emotional all evening. Keanu smiled softly. Me too. Marcus looked between them awkwardly. You guys are acting like I cured cancer or something. That made both adults laugh. And for a moment, the heavy atmosphere finally eased. Then the director suddenly cleared her throat. There's actually something we should probably discuss now. Marcus frowned slightly. What? She looked toward Keanu briefly before continuing. The scholarship committee made its final decision earlier this week. Marcus immediately felt nervous again. His fingers tightened around the water bottle in his hands. He already knew what rejection sounded like. We regret to inform you. Due to limited funding, many qualified applicants. He mentally prepared himself. The director opened the folder carefully. Marcus Hill, she announced softly, your scholarship application has officially been approved. Marcus blinked. What? Full tuition coverage, she continued. Books, housing assistance, and transportation support included. For several seconds, Marcus genuinely stopped breathing. The words didn't feel real. You're serious, he whispered. The director smiled warmly. Very serious. Marcus looked completely frozen. His eyes moved slowly toward Keanu like he needed confirmation. Keanu nodded gently. You earned it. The teenager's breathing became shaky. No, there's no way. It's real, the director assured him. Marcus suddenly stood up from his chair. Then sat back down again. Then laughed nervously. Then covered his face with both hands. Because after years of stress, years of fear, years of believing opportunities belonged to other people, someone had finally opened a door for him. And he didn't know how to process it. Tears slowly filled his eyes before he could stop them. I'm sorry, he whispered quickly, embarrassed. Keanu immediately shook his head. Don't apologize. Marcus wiped his face roughly. His voice cracked completely. My mom's gonna lose her mind. That made everyone laugh softly. Then Marcus looked directly at Keanu again. You really had nothing to do with this. Keanu smiled slightly. Actually, I did ask to personally review a few applications tonight. Marcus stared at him in shock. But the committee chose you because of your work, Keanu added. Not because you met me. The director nodded firmly. That's true. Marcus still looked overwhelmed. Then quietly he asked the question sitting in his heart. Why would you help someone you just met? Keanu leaned forward slightly. Because sometimes one opportunity changes an entire life. Marcus swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt emotional again. A nearby volunteer who overheard the announcement quietly started clapping. Then another joined. Within seconds, several volunteers across the hall applauded loudly. Marcus looked stunned as people smiled proudly at him. Not with pity. With respect, and suddenly, without even thinking about it, Marcus stepped forward and hugged Keanu tightly. The entire room became silent again. Keanu hugged him back immediately. You did this, Keanu said quietly. Don't forget that. Marcus closed his eyes tightly for a moment. Because for the first time in years, the future no longer felt impossible.